Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Andrea and this is Beyond the Pink Door. So today's video is a sew along tutorial. There's more tutorial than sewing in it, so disclaimer, if you're somebody that's here for the sewing, there's not a lot of sewing action. There's more demonstration action, more tutorial, but by the end of it you will know how to make a Dani jacket. So this is the Dani Jacket, which is one of the newest patterns from Atelier Joop, who are a Belgian sewing brand. They're one of my favourite sewing pattern designers. Just absolutely love them. I have made this jacket twice now and absolutely love it, and I've been requested to do a tutorial, so here it is. So I'm going to tell you about the jacket itself. So it is a boxy jacket. My chair out of the way. So it comes to this length on me. Details, I am 5'0", so this is the length on me. It's got a hood option. There's the hood. It's also got a collar option. It's got concealed pockets there at the side. They're fitted into the side seam. You have an option for a zip, or you have an option like I have with a button and buttonhole band or a fasteners. So it is fully lined inside, down the sleeves, everywhere basically. So this tutorial is going to show you how to make it. For size reference, I measure at a size 38 on Atelier Joop. If I am making a blouse, I'll size down to a 36, that seems to fit me better. If I make, say, a dress, I will do 36 on top, and I'll grade out to 38 because I need it on the hips. For this, I actually made my daughter one a couple of weeks ago, and she measures below the smallest size, but I still made her the smallest size. Now for interest, I put it on and it fit me perfectly, so I didn't feel restricted anywhere in it, and I felt that if I wanted to make one for myself, sorry about the jumper on the ironing board, that's that the smallest size would fit me perfectly, and that's exactly what I've made. I've made the smallest size and I really like the fit. I have it on over a fairly light sweatshirt, but I have put it on over heavier jumpers and it buttons up no problem. There's lots of room in it, so it is quite roomy. So I would figure that sizing down from your actual measurements should work. I made absolutely no alterations whatsoever to this pattern, so the sleeve length hasn't been altered. Normally I would personally have to shorten a sleeve because all my limbs are short, obviously, but no, this is absolutely perfect. So I think rather than diving in to make one for yourself, I would possibly whip up a very quick, now I'm talking about very quick toile one. So if you have an old bed sheet, actually an old blanket I think would be perfect, because that would give you more of an indication of how the sizing would be. So basically just cut out your fronts, your back, two sleeves, that's it. Keep it simple and just pop them together and see how it feels over any sort of clothing that you want to wear this over. But yeah, I have sized down and it's perfect. So without further ado, let's get into the sew along tutorial. So here I am with my fabric. So this is some of last year's Atelier Joop coating. It's got a percentage of wool in it. I think it's 20% wool and 80% polyester. I hope I'm right on that. But I have a remnant of this, and it's just enough to make the coat. I have decided to splurge on the lining of the body with this Liberty print, and I'm going to do the sleeves in this lovely viscose lining. So it's shiny, so it's going to make it easier for me to get my arms in and out of the coat. So this is basically just for the sleeves and the pockets, and then this is going to be the main body, so the front, the back, and into the hood. I did think about using this combination. So this is a viscose. I thought the colours were really lovely, and then this fabric, which is another one of our linings for the sleeves, but I have decided to go the slightly more splurged route. So here are all the pattern pieces. There's quite a few pattern pieces, and don't be put off because a lot of them are almost like doubles. So some of them are for the lining, some of them are for the actual coat. So the first thing I'm going to do is separate them. So this is the back lining and the front lining. That's going to be out of my Liberty. This is my hood center lining and my hood as well. So they're all going to be out of the Liberty fabric. So I'm going to put them to one side. Here's my lining for the sleeve, and then I'm going to grab the one as well for the pocket. So they're for the pocket, so they're going to be out of my shiny lining. Again, putting them to one side. And then what I have then are the main pieces. So I've got the back, I've got the front, I've got the sleeve, so they're all going to be out of the coating. I have the hood facing. I have the front facing. I also have the hood, and I have the centre of the hood. So they're my coating. And then this is my button band. So essentially I'm going to be using 4 different fabrics. Now I didn't choose one for this, so that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, I've decided I'm going to use this lovely gabardine from Atelier Brunette. This matches quite well, and it's actually really nice and soft. So I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to pin this on first. Yeah, and it works along the width of the fabric, so that's really good. Now it doesn't look like it matches on the screen there, but yeah, I like it with the coating. So I'm actually going to pin that on, and I'm going to cut that first. So here are all my pattern pieces that are not going to be necessarily out of the coat fabric, all laid out. So here's the button band on the gabardine, so 2 of this. Here's the sleeve on the sleeve lining fabric. I was going to cut the pockets out of this as well, but I've enough Liberty and I prefer Liberty pockets. Here then is the Liberty for the back, which is on a fold, the front, which we need 2 of, and then the lining for the centre of the hood, which is just on 1 piece, and I managed to squeeze them right across that. Be careful of this piece that you have it the right way up if you've got a directional print like me. So you'll see these arrows, so they're all pointing to the bottom of all the pieces. And the same here with the hood. So I'll just chuck this here until I make space there. And then here are my pocket pieces. I need 4 of these. So I have folded my fabric back, so I've got 4 layers there. So I'm going to cut all of those. Now before we cut into our lovely coating fabric, we have to do a little preparation work to 4 of our pattern pieces. So if you're making the version as I am, with the button band down the front, you need to get your front piece, your front facing, your hood piece, and your hood facing, and we have to just trim 2.5 centimeters off the front of these pieces. So for instance, here's my hood facing. I'm measuring in 2.5 centimeters. I'm going to draw a line, and then we're going to trim that amount off. So we're going to do that with this one. We're going to cut the same piece off here on the hood, and the same on the front pieces. So make sure that you cut it off the right side of the front facing, so where it dips down here. So it's basically the center front. So I'm going to join up, mark a few 2.5 centimeter marks, join them up, and then trim that off. and the same down the center front piece of my front. Now here's just a little overview of my pattern pieces laid out. So that's my back there on the fold. This is my front. I have my sleeve here. This is my front facing. That's the center of the hood. This is the hood piece, and this is the hood facing. Now I've just laid them out because what I really want to do is make sure that I have all of my check matching throughout the jacket. So I'll just give you a quick look. What I'm going to do is, when I have decided where everything is going to go, I'm just going to go through one layer of the fabric, and I'm going to cut them singly and then cut them through the second piece, making sure that everything is identical. So, okay, I've made sure that my fabric is lined up here. So this is my center back. As I say, it's not pinned in because I haven't fully decided yet. I've just placed down my front piece beside it so that I know my side seams are going to match up. I'm going to determine the center part of this, all depending on how I want the front to look. So ideally I'd like that when it's buttoned up, that the check matches all over. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that though, because it's quite a big pattern. Now here is the sleeve. What I want is that when my jacket is made, that when I have my hands down to the side, that these stripes will match across the front and across the sleeve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure and make sure that this amount here, when I finally pinned this in place, this amount here, so this is just the side seam, that this length, this point and this point match up. So you can see the big thick purple is there. I'm also centering up my sleeve on a yellow line as well. Then my front facing, I would like for that to match here. So I've just kind of loosely put it down there at the moment, and I'll try and make sure that this point here in relation to this line match up the same here. And then this is the middle of my hood. So I'd like for this panel, when it's popped into the neck, that this stripe will match down across the back as well. So when the hood is up, this stripe will transfer up into the hood as well. And then the hood, I am hoping that I will get this part here, which matches into the neck of the jacket, that will match up going in here. And then finally, here's the facing for the hood, and I'm going to make sure as well that it matches across there as well. I still have to match up, or just have a look to see even if I'm going to try and get the neckline to match nicer into the neckline of the body of the coat. But yeah, we'll see. I'll be happy to have all of this matching here and then match it into the sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and pin these through to one layer for the moment. So I've all my pieces pinned through one layer. The other stripes I wanted to match as well is my shoulder seam, of course. So you can see there that this point of the front shoulder is in the same place along this stripe as this one here. And I managed to pin my front facing here in between the front and back. So now this is in line with this, so I know that's going to match. My sleeve is pinned in place. The hood is, so again, this is going to match this part here, and my facing is matching. And then here's the center of my hood. Now I could move that over to fit in here probably, but there's a lot of waste when you're trying to pattern match, so that's only going to get cut out once. So it is, as we can see, it's going to match into the back, center back, and I also have it matching so that this stripe along here matches into this stripe in the hood. And what I simply did was I measured from here to here, and I put that measurement from there to there. So I'm going to cut out all of these pieces, remembering that this one is on the fold. So I have all my pattern pieces cut out. I've taken out some of the waste fabric, but I've left them in their same positions. And I'm going to start with the back because that's on the fold. Sorry about the creaking, it's just the tripod. So what I've done is I've put a little notch here to show the center, and the same at the top. I'm going to remove the pins and I'm going to flip my pattern piece, my back piece over. I'm going to squeeze the little notch there in the middle, and I'm basically going to put the pattern piece on its, make sure it's like a mirror image. Now I'll do a little bit more tidying than that. What I'll do then is I will put my pattern piece on top, and I'll just make sure that it's keeping its shape. And then I'll basically cut around the piece I've cut out already, and I'll just make sure again. May have to take just, so you can see, just a little piece off there. I just didn't cut it very accurately. And then I will do the same for, say, the facing. I've all of these pieces notched as well, so now, so I use my patterns then as a reference to make sure that the shape is still correct. I've got all of my notches cut on my first pieces, and then basically I pop them down and I make sure that they are identical. Of course, something very important to say as well is that you flip them over, so you'll end up with two mirror pieces. I'm going to grab my sleeve now. My sleeve over there, and I'm going to move it over here, and then I have my hood and my facing as well. So I've repinned all my pattern pieces back on top of my cutout pieces, and I've made sure that all of my notches are snipped. Be very careful when you're cutting the notches, because on this sort of fabric it's just automatic that you cut a bigger notch. So remember that the seam allowance is 1.5 centimeters, so just be careful. And even though 1.5 centimeters is quite big, it's very easy when your fabric is thick that you can cut through a little bit more. Then I have all my other pieces here, and I've got this one extra piece, and this is to make a little loop so that we can hang the coat up. So very simple, use any of your chosen pieces. I decided that I would make it out of the pink because it would just highlight the pink colour in the body of it, and it would be very easy to find it hanging up the coat. So we're sewing at last. We want to grab our backs, front and our pocket pieces, and we'll notice on the back pieces that we have these notches, and on the front we have notches, and on the pockets we have notches. So if we discard our pattern pieces and open out our back, we are going to pin. I'm going to take 2 pattern pieces off and matching right side to right side. We are going to stitch our pattern piece, our pocket piece, in place. Now, the side seam on the coat is 1.5 centimeters. So I'm actually going to sew these on with a 1 centimeter seam allowance so that I'll ensure they stay in the side seam. So there's my back, and again I'm going to do the same with the front pieces, right sides to right side, pin in place, and then we'll come back for the next step. So this is how your pocket looks, and the next thing that I've done on my pockets is I've pulled them over like this, and I've done a little top stitching there just to hold them in place, and that just keeps, it probably gives just a little bit more reinforcement to this area of the jacket, and it keeps the pocket from kind of poking out. And here's one I prepared earlier. So that one is top stitched. So grab your corresponding front piece and your pins, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to make sure that my stripes are matching up, and then my pockets are also matching up. I'm going to make sure that the stripes particularly are matching. And I'm going to pin my seams together. And then I'm pretty sure you should be able to see the little notches that are there. There. So I'm going to sew from the underarm down to here, do a back stitch, and then I'm going to sew from the next notch here down to the end and back stitch, and I'm going to use the 1.5 centimeter seam allowance for that. So our seam is done from underarm to notch and to notch to hem, and the next seam we want to do is around the pocket. So we're going to pin around, and then we're literally going to sew from where the side seam is here, using 1.5 centimeter seam allowance and joining to there. And this is how it looks. So you can see my seam there. Now the next thing I'm going to do, because I hate a pocket bag just flapping around inside a jacket, I'm actually going to hand stitch it down to the front. So I'm going to make sure that my side seam is flat, and I'm going to pin around. Now on the last jacket I made like this, it was on much fluffier fabric, and I very simply stitched along the outside here through all the layers, and on the outside it was hardly visible, and I just sort of fluffed up the fabric again, but that it'll be too obvious on this one here. So I'm just going to do some hand stitching around, and I'm hoping it won't be too obvious on the outside. It's just going to be a loose one, just to kind of hold it in place. I'm definitely having one of those shoulda woulda thoughts. I'm hardly going to make this coat again, but you'd think I should have thought of this after the first one. I'd like if the pocket bag was extended so that it would go all the way to the edge of the fabric here, and then it would be held in, and then that would be really nice. So I haven't done that, but I have threaded a double needle. I started with a back stitch here on the side seam, and I'm just doing, they're quite big stitches, and I've checked on the outside and there's nothing visible, so that'll just hold the pocket from kind of gathering and going into a ball on the inside of the jacket. So I've done another back stitch once I got to the corner there, and that's only through that fabric, and then I'm just picking up what I can of the coat fabric and going into the lining. The reason I'm not doing any bigger stitches is I don't want to see the impression of them on the outside of the jacket. Do another back stitch here. That's just so that if one of these other stitches unravels, it'll only unravel as far as the back stitch. If you have a better stitch or a better process for this, please pop it into the comments. And that's basically it. My double thread has just got me around to the side seam again. A couple of back stitches there. Let's see how it looks on the outside. I'm happy with that. Nice little peek of my Liberty on the inside. That's it. Our next step now is to sew our shoulder seams. So again, right sides together, matching up our raw edges. And sewing at 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. We are going to sew and then press our seams open. It's time to sew our sleeve seam now, so grab your sleeve piece and make sure your seam allowances are together. I'm making sure that my stripes are together. And pin and sew. You'll notice at the bottom that there's a little shape, and that's for your hem on the bottom of your sleeve. So sew and then go out at an angle there, keeping in line with the edge. Do your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Like so. See it there? And then I've actually made this already, of course, so I know that the length of the sleeve is perfect on me. So when I was pressing my inside seam, I also pressed up my hem as well. So turn your sleeve right side out and have a look for your notches. I see that I've got a single notch here, I've got a double notch here, and same on my coat, my jacket, and I also have a notch at the top here for the shoulder seam. So pop your sleeve in. Now, first of all, I'm matching my underarm. I'm putting my pins through the sleeve side because I'm going to sew inside here. I'm matching up my shoulder. Now I'm going to match up my front notches. I'm matching up my back notches. And then I'm going to pop another pin in here. Now these sleeves go in really well, there's very little ease, so there's no worries really about any tucks or gathers. So just keeping your raw edges even. I usually start at the underarm, so because this seam is quite bulky, I would start my stitching off to one side, then go over this bulky seam and then go all around. Now, positioning my foot back from this seam, I'm going to start sewing there. Now making sure that my seam stays flat underneath. Now making sure everything again stays flat. Now, next part of the construction is the hood. So I've got my hood piece here, I've got my center piece, I've got my arrows pointed in the same direction, so I know that this notch here matches up to the corresponding notch here. And I'm hoping this is going to match nicely. I hope so. Okay, I'm going to match up my notch here. Oh, my stripe has gone a little off. Oh, that's a pity. That's disappointing. But these things happen, don't they? So I obviously miscalculated somewhere, but hey ho, it's at the back of the hood. So for the number of times that I'm going to put my hood up, and it's all happening behind me, so I won't get too upset. Matching up these. And this is a nice sized hood. Oh, it's actually matching up on this side. Oh, that is weird. obviously didn't have my pattern piece positioned as symmetrically as I thought. There's a little bit of stretch in this fabric, so I'm going to use that as my excuse for going a bit off. So now we're basically going to sew around these two seams, again using our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. And I'm actually going to press them flat as well, because with such bulky fabric I feel the flat is the best. This is how our hood looks with our pressed out seams. And then it's time to grab the jacket again. So just working on the neck and being careful not to stretch it in any way. We've got some notches, so we've a notch in the centre back and we've a corresponding notch in the centre of the middle part of our hood. Then we've got a notch here on our hood, and that's going to match up to our shoulder seams. And then our neckline matches up. And again over here to our shoulder seam. And then we're going to sew across through all the layers. We're going to make sure that all of our seams stay flat, so our shoulder seams and our hood seams. And if any of your seams aren't flat by the time you've sewn again, I would highly recommend going back, unpicking whatever stitch you need and sewing over it a second time. Now this is how it looks, all sewn together. Ooh, I even got a stripe matching up down the front. Now that makes me happy, seeing as I didn't get exactly the stripes matching up on the hood, just off. So next to pick up are our bands for our buttons or our snaps that I'm going to use. What we want to do is put them right sides together, and then we're going to sew across the short ends, and then we're going to turn out and press. So we're going to do that on both. Now here's my two bands. I have sewn, I don't know if you can see there, I've done 4 rows of stitching, 1 centimetre in between each row, and that just gives the band a nice finish. So on my stitch plate I have 1, 2 and 3. So for my first line I keep the edge of my fabric there along 1 and I sew all the way to the end. Then when I'm doing the next row of stitching I move the edge of the fabric in line with number 2 and I watch the edge of this along number 2, same for number 3, and just over the time of using this sewing machine I know that if I keep the fabric close to this hole here, that is 4 centimetres, and I just sew and make sure that the edge of the fabric stays in line. So grab your jacket, and the first thing I've done is I've put a pin here 7.5 centimetres up from the hem, and I've done that on both sides. And then we have some notches on our button placket, couldn't think of the name of it, and we've a notch here on our front. So keeping raw edges together, place the button band just in line with that pin, so 7.5 centimeters up from the end. Match up these notches. Looks good. And then the next notch is to match up the button band with this seam here. I'm pushing mine flat, it's just automatically going flat for me. There's my notch. And pop another pin in here. And then there's no notch to show us where it ends, but just place your fabric on top of your hood like that. I'm going to do the same on the other side, and I'm going to sew them in place 1 centimeter in from the edge. So it's just like a basting stitch, just to hold it in place until the lining goes in. So it's onto the lining, and I'm going to start with the hood lining just because we've only just done the hood, so it's fresh in our minds. So here is our fabric facing, and then we have our, well, I have my lovely Liberty here, so I'm going to do the same. I've chopped my notches, so I'm going to do the same as I did on the last one, so it's like rinse and repeat. I'm going to pin my notches together and I'm going to sew around. So just as we did on the previous one, and then when we grab our facing, we are going to have right sides together up at the top. So the top is the straight end, the bottom is the curved, and we're going to sew right across here. So I have my facing here with my seam pressed flat, and I've pressed all my seams flat on my hood. So I have a little notch here at the center of my hood. And I'm going to grab my facing, making sure that I'm pinning the correct side, so the shorter side. It's just a matter of pinning this. I start in the middle, start on the end, and pin it in place and sew around. I'm thinking as well that I will top stitch it down like I did with the pocket. So I've top stitched down, and I've also made my little hanging loop, and I've sewn it there into the center of the hood, and I've also left 2 long bits attached, and you'll see later on in the tutorial why I've done that. So next thing to do is to grab our front lining pieces and our front facing pieces, and we are going to match them up right sides together. So, and we're going to sew along this seam, and we're going to match up our notches. So pinned, pins holding them together. So I think that's, sorry, what a mess. Okay, so lining piece, facing piece, right sides together, and again I'm going to top stitch down like I did with the hood. Next pattern up is your back piece. The The only difference to the back piece, to the back of the main jacket, is that we've got a little fold here in the centre back. So you'll see on your pattern piece that you've got a little notch. So what I'm doing is I am bringing my two notches together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just sew about maybe 2 centimeters down here, and then I'm going to make that into like a little inverted pleat, that's all. So here's our little inverted pleat there in the back. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to follow the same steps as I did for the main part of the jacket. I'm going to sew my shoulder seams, I'm going to sew my side seams, then I'm going to insert my sleeves, and then I'll come back for the next step. Now I'm actually really happy with how my lining is looking. So this is my lining, and I've just pinned my hood onto it, matching up all the notches and everything, just as we did on the main jacket. So I'm going to sew that seam along there now. You can see my coat hanger sticking out. So at this point you should have used all of your pattern pieces. So grab your jacket, and we're going to actually start adding our lining to our jacket by attaching it on the hem, which may sound a little bit strange. So jacket right side out, lining wrong side, and starting in the corner. I'm going to pin right sides together. I'm going to match up the seams first. Now we've got this big piece in the middle. I'm going to match up the two notches. Popping a pin in each side. I do like this pin dish, but a lot of my pins stick to the bottom of it. So here's my center pin. Here are two other pins each side, and that, I guess, is about 20 centimeters. So I'm going to keep this piece open so that I can turn the coat out through there. So we're going to sew from here to this pin. We're going to skip the bit in the middle, and we're going to start at the next pin and sew to the other side. Now I'm just going to check the seam allowance, and it is 1.5 centimeters. Okay, so we've all that pinned and sewn. I've actually left the pin there in the center. So what we're going to basically do now is sew all around. So I'm actually going to start at I'm popping the button band inside. I'm going to grab the neck seam, and I'm going to pin it so that the other neck seam is behind. I'm going to put my pins there at an angle, which I normally don't do, but this is actually so thick. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So pin, pin. And then through the hood, I have a notch here for the center, and I've got a seam here for the facing. Now this is one side of the hood. I'm going to pin in a couple of spots. This is the other side of the hood. To match up my pattern again, and pop in another couple of pins. Now grab the bottom hem of the coat, give it a shake, and then what happens down here, so this is the seam we've sewn along the bottom. The bottom band needs to be at the bottom, so I'm folding over the fabric on top. I'm going to leave my seam flat like that so it's less bulky. Now I'm going to match my notches. It's actually easy for me to find the matching because my stripes are matching, which is very satisfying. Another couple of pins in. And we'll do the other front, so just in case that didn't make sense, we'll have a look at this again. So at the bottom, the button band goes in, and this extra piece here folds over. Now what we're going to do, again using 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, we're going to start at the bottom of one side, sew all the way up and over this seam here, which is the neck seam, all around the hood. There's the center of the facing of the hood, again down to the neck seam and right down to the very hem again. So this is how it looks now, and the next job we have is to turn the entire jacket out through the gap that we left in the hem. So I'm going to pay particular attention to where the button band reaches the bottom. I'm going to pull that, and the same the other side. So I'm basically grabbing it and just pulling the fabric back. Now grab your sleeves. Just keep turning until everything comes out. Give it a shake. Here comes the hood. Affectionately known as birthing your coat. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press up 5.5 centimeters. It's 7.5 centimeters minus 1.5, so that is 6 centimeters here. I'm going to measure across and make sure that is 6 centimeters across, and just press that along the hem. I'm also going to press all around where I've just done that seam, so all around. Very happy with my stripe matching as I go around. Okay, I'm going to do that. So I've pressed all around, and the next thing I'm going to do is where my little hanging tag is. I'm going to go into my jacket, and I'm going to grab the two pieces. So I'm in here at the neck. I've got my my notch there that shows my centre back. I have the two long tails, and I'm actually going to attach them to this seam. Now I'm leaving, I hope you can see that, I'm leaving it a little bit looser, so I'm not putting it tight. There's about probably 2 centimeters there. And I'm going to sew over that there, and that just holds, it's just like a little anchoring stitch really, holding the neckline together. So there we go. I just find that when you hang up your coat, then you're not just hanging up by the lining, you're actually hanging up the entire coat. That's what I was trying to explain. Now, next thing to do is to put our sleeve lining into our sleeves. So our sleeves are out there. These are, so I'm just grabbing it by the shoulder, and I'm pushing the sleeve in. And do the same on the other side, or you could put your hand in through here and pull it out through. I'm aiming for the under seam, grabbing that out here in line with the sleeve seam. So just checking that it hasn't become twisted. Now, from out here, we have our lining, we have our sleeve, and what I'm going to do, and I'm making sure that I'm not twisting the lining of the sleeve, is I'm pulling the lining out, and I'm going to turn it so that the right side of the lining and the right side of the fabric are meeting. So you can see I'm just twisting it there. Maybe I need to pull more lining out here. Pull more sleeve out. And then just bring the right sides of the sleeve seams together. Again, I'm putting my pin in at right angles. So you can see there what I've done, I hope. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do the other one first, but then I'm going to go in here from the inside, carefully pull the sleeve out. And then put your lining, shove some lining into the sleeve, and then pop some pins around, keeping the raw edges even. And then I'm going to sew around that. So I'm going to put that under my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew all around. I'm going to show you that a second time on the other sleeve, because I'm not sure if that actually translated very well on the camera. So here's our sleeve. Here's our lining inside. So basically I'm going to pull my lining out. Again, you can see my sleeve seam. And then I'm going to turn it back pin it in place. Basically like that. And then go to the inside of the coat. Just careful so you don't remove the pin or you'll have to do all that again. And then here's our sleeve. Shove our lining into it while holding onto the pin. But I'm also holding onto the raw edge as well. And then again, keeping the raw edges even. Pop some pins around. And now I'm going to sew around that. Okay. Okay, I hope that seeing it sewn helped. The next thing to do now is to pull your sleeve out. So from the front of the coat, put your hand in, grab the sleeve out. Now I've already pressed up the hem, and then just straighten out your side seam. That's great. If it won't straighten out, that means that your sleeve has got twisted. And that is your coat fully lined. And the last thing that you have to do is slip stitch this little gap closed. And then the final job is to put in your fasteners on your button band.